My name is Allister Bigsby, and I had that dream again last night. The same one I've had a million times. A recurring dream that, at times, I'm able to control. Most of the time, it isn't very vivid. It becomes more of a feeling that dissolves away almost as fast as it starts. Other times, it feels like I'm reliving the events at an even more heightened level. This is one of those times. The dream is about when my gift was assigned. If you don't know, every person in the city of Adentry, regardless of caste, is given a gift approximately 10 years before they take their trials. The main purpose of the trials is to have this gift removed. The council that runs the city claims that the trials and gifts are blessings that are intended to strengthen the resolve of the people in the city. But I've always thought of them more as a curse that constantly looms over people, even well after the trials have concluded. It had been a beautiful day, one that was full of happiness and optimism. One of the last truly happy days that my friends and I would ever have. I wanted to scream at my brother Kane, my friend Hunter, and my now girlfriend Paige to appreciate what they still had before they lost it. I had done this countless times before. They hardly ever seemed to hear it. Once, Hunter had looked back at me with a blank expression and said that we didn't have a choice, that this had all been predetermined. No one could change it. I had tried to change it in previous dreams, though, but it was just that. A dream. Nothing could change what had already happened in the real world. The one time that I had stopped our gifts from being assigned, I had woken up feeling my gift was even heavier than before. I had felt so weightless in my dream that my body had forgotten that the extra weight was still there. The answer to stopping the gifts from being assigned had been surprisingly simple in the dream. I just told my friends to tell the officials that we didn't want our gifts. Our parents and the other councilmen had never thought of that option before, so they just let us all go about our lives without having our gifts assigned. The rest of the kids rejoiced and carried me off into the street, celebrating as gifts fell off of every citizen. The walls fell down that separated the castes, and everyone in the city came together as one entity. Unfortunately, though, that's not how the dream normally went, nor was that how it happened in reality. Not even close. The dream always started with the four of us walking out of our neighborhood, hearts full of hope and the world at our fingertips. We had all been looking forward to this exciting event for years. It was the start of growing up because as soon as our gifts were assigned, we were immediately seen as young adults and not children. We knew the possibilities of what our gifts could be, but no one ever thought that they'd be the one to have an arm removed or have their tongue cut out. Most of the kids, me included, thought that it would be funny if they only had a permanent pinky cast, a singular eye patch over one eye, horns on top of their heads, a tail, a nose ring, or just a skull cap that didn't block any of other senses. However, most were not assigned one of the funny, milder gifts. They almost always had to come to terms with something that they could never have imagined. The dream was usually pretty hazy, but this was the clearest it had been in a long time. It started like it always did, with a walk through our neighborhood. Like all neighborhoods in the artisan caste, ours is primarily composed of brick buildings. In contrast, from what I've heard, the austere caste primarily has wooden and mud buildings. I know from first-hand experience that the aristocrat caste has reflective glass and steel buildings with the occasional large brick building. Even though I had never been to the austere caste, I had heard many rumors about both castes since I was a kid. The primary two were that the austere people were uneducated and never bathed, while the aristocrat people never worked and had servants that practically carried them everywhere. I knew that neither of these rumors could possibly be 100% true. After all, the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. While I dreamed, I watched helplessly as my friends and I naively marched towards the assignment of our gifts. Sometimes I was watching from above, and sometimes I was actively participating in the fun with my friends. As the four of us joked and horsed around, other artisan 10-year-old children around us did the same. As a kid, I had only focused on myself and my friends, so my dream had always only focused on the same. I had tried to explore beyond my little bubble in a few previous dreams, but everything just got fuzzy when I did this. Unlike the trial choosings, which take place in the Colosseum, gift assignments were done in our own individual castes and not in a neutral site. The councilmen from each caste were in charge of administering the gift assignments. No one knew what their gift would be until they were given their assignment, which didn't happen until seconds before they were put on. The councilmen didn't have any real responsibilities here, though. All they had to do was make sure everyone felt at ease about this life-altering event. While growing up, before our gifts are assigned, we're taught that it is a privilege to be part of this coming-of-age ceremony. Afterwards, most of us realize that it's not a privilege, it's a way to control us. Nobody ever said it out loud, but I assumed that it was a common thought that we all shared. As my friends and I inched forward towards our gift assignments, I looked around for my father, a councilman. He was there to greet all of the children before the biggest event of their young lives thus far. More were to come. Each councilman oversaw a set of 5 doors along with the ushering in of 10-year-old children. On the outside, I was my 10-year-old self, joking around to pass the time. My dad waved to me and my friends, yelling indistinctly. I was never quite sure what my father had said. We were just too far away from one another. I had tried to find out in other dreams, but it never became clear. On the inside, though, I knew what was coming. The foreboding and anxiety-ridden feeling that encompassed my being was overwhelming. So much so that I wasn't able to enjoy the last remnants of laughter that my friends and I shared before having our gifts forced upon us. Hunter was always first. We joked one final time before watching the door close behind him. It would be the last time that Hunter would see us. I wasn't in the room with him. No one was. This was an endeavor that we all took on alone. Afterward, we recounted our experiences to one another. The doors closed behind Hunter as he stepped into the 15-foot by 15-foot room. A voice overhead welcomed him and told him to sit in the lone chair that was in the otherwise barren room. The chair looked like it belonged in a dentist's office instead of in the small space. Hunter sat in the chair without reflecting on how menacing it truly was. He was instructed to place his arms on the armrests before they could proceed. Doing as he was told, Hunter's wrists and ankles were then immediately forced down by straps, not allowing him to move from the chair. A video screen on the wall started shuffling through different gift options. They were flashing so quickly that Hunter couldn't tell one from the other. The video screen quickly stopped and landed on the last thing that Hunter would ever see as a child. The picture of a man with dark glasses and a cane. He wasn't quite sure what was happening. Surely he wasn't going to be blind. That's not something that would be happening to him. That sort of gift was for other, less fortunate people. Hunter always assumed he would just have a permanent fist or even a permanent backpack. Maybe something goofy like his tongue being encased so he sounded funny. He certainly never thought it would be blindness. Before he could process what was happening, more straps encased his head and neck. The ceiling then opened above him and a contraption slowly came down, covering his eyes. After a moment of being oblivious to what would come next, Hunter screamed as an agonizing pain consumed his entire being. The pain started in his center of his forehead before moving up and singeing his entire hairline. The metal was fused to his skull, blocking any light from reaching his eyes. Hunter came out of that experience with an excruciating headache, a 1-inch bar that went along his burned hairline, and the inability to see. As soon as his newly assigned gift was fused to his skull, he was unstrapped and the chair leaned forward, causing him to fall to the ground. Dazed and confused, Hunter did his best to stand up, not fully comprehending what had just happened. He called out for help. There was no answer from that lonely room. After what felt like hours of being alone in the dark, an attendant finally escorted him out, leaving the room empty for the next unsuspecting child. Paige was next. She hugged Kane and me and waved to our dad as she skipped merrily into the room. As soon as she walked in, she caught the faint scent of burnt hair. She shrugged it off as just her imagination. She followed the instructions as she was strapped into the chair by her wrists and ankles as the video screen flashed. She then stared in horror as the screen showed the picture of a man covering his ears as red X's flashed on both sides of his head. Like Hunter before her, Paige's neck and head were tightly strapped down. Out of the corner of both eyes, she could see spikes coming towards her. The spikes moved at a snail's pace as the hum of the machine above her emanated throughout the room. She went deaf to her own cries of pain as both ears were penetrated by the spikes and the scent of burnt hair filled her nostrils. The spikes had been fused to the inside of her ears, preventing any sound from entering. The chair dumped Paige out after releasing her from the straps. She then stumbled out of the recently opened door. Kane's turn now. He told me to wish him luck before entering the room. He waved to our dad and the door closed behind him. Without questioning his instructions, Kane sat down and was strapped into the chair. After realizing that something was wrong, he started to fight back and tried to get up. The voice warned him to settle down. Kane didn't listen and kept trying to get free. The voice gave him a final warning, and then several thicker straps were unleashed all over Kane's body, making it hard for him to even breathe. His 10-year-old self started to panic and hyperventilate. He screamed until the video screen began to flash wildly in front of him. Terrified by what was happening, he watched the images cycle through until they abruptly stopped. The image was of a man standing with giant weights on his legs. Confused, Kane yelled out, asking what was happening. No reply was given. Instead, his legs were spread further apart and lifted above his head. He hung there for what seemed like an eternity before something above him started to envelop his legs. He couldn't tell what was being done to him through the blinding light. Suddenly, Kane felt a searing pain go through his body as his gift was fused to his legs. He passed out. He awoke on the ground to a couple attendants trying to lift him. He pushed them away and immediately fell back to the ground. He tried getting up to walk out of the room but fell again. The attendants helped him as his new metallic legs, which added 50 pounds to his lower body, scraped the hard metal floor like nails on a chalkboard. It would take weeks for him to stand on his own, and several months would pass before he could actually walk. It was now my turn. Unlike the others, I actually knew what waited for me on the other side of the door. I also knew that the dream wouldn't end until I faced it once again. I had tried countless times before to wait it out until I woke up. That never worked. The dream would either be at a standstill or it would go on whether I wanted to or not. This time, I decided to just get it over with as quickly as possible. Before going into the room, I looked over at my father, expecting a big smile and a wave, something I desperately needed. That's not what I saw. No, I saw Cecil, the head councilman, laughing at me maniacally as he held up my father's severed head. I was petrified. This had never happened before. When I looked away and back at the door, Cecil was standing right in front of me, still holding my father's bloody head. Stunned, I couldn't speak or move. Cecil then threw the head at me and I instinctively caught it. While I stared in my father's cold, dead eyes, guards threw me into the room. Struggling frantically to get away, I was held down by those same guards as Cecil started the fusing process. Their horrific laughter continued as I screamed in agony. Normally, at the end of the dream, like Kane before me, I try to walk out of the room but keep falling over because of the additional 50 pounds on my torso. I'm then helped out of the room by attendants to meet my friends. We all sit silently for a little while as we slowly come to grips with what has happened to us. One of the attendants usually comments on how Kane and I are two halves of the same whole. I'm not sure if that happened on that day or later in life, but it's something that has stuck with me since I heard it. This time, the dream didn't end like that. It finished with my pain somewhat subsiding, and instead of being tossed out of the chair, my straps were tightened. Cecil then brought in the corpse of Kane, Hunter, and Paige and flung them onto the ground in front of me. Cecil and his guards laughed at my misery as they closed the door behind them. Everything then went dark. Thinking the dream was finally over, I tried to wake myself up. However, the light turned back on as Kane, Hunter, Paige, and my father's headless corpses all stood up around me. Bloodied and disfigured, they then rushed towards me. This is how the dream ended this time. I hope to never go through such an ordeal again. But then again, with the trials coming up, I'm sure to be given a new nightmare. Okay, Allister, just a little further and stand right there, Nolan said as he guided me blindfolded. Nolan Slade was a puzzle master and one of my trainers for the trials. I'd been training non-stop with him for a couple of months now to prepare me for my trials. Nolan primarily helped me with my mental trial, which was going to be a puzzle challenge. I also had a physical trial trainer who was helping me run various obstacle courses, as that was going to be my physical trial, but he wasn't as thorough as Nolan. You see, there are 3 trials we must face when we come of age if we want to have our gift removed. I've talked on here before about how mine and my friends' gifts got assigned and about the different castes that are in our city, Adentry, but I didn't really go into detail about the trials we must take in order to get them removed. The aforementioned mental and physical trials, which seem pretty self-explanatory, would be something as simple as an obstacle course or a balance beam for the physical, or for the mental challenge you'd have to solve puzzles or participate in a quiz challenge, stuff like that. After, we must take the 3rd trial, which is known as the Dread Trial, which was something that would be unpredictable. We would never know what they were until we actually got to the trials. At the choosings, which take place about 6 months before the trials, we are told what our mental and physical trials will be. We are not told what our dread trials will be until we arrive at the trials. We are given information about them right before they happen, but not enough to really go on in advance. So Nolan is doing his best to give me some training on what to expect during my dread trial. He hasn't really told me what I'm doing, but he says that's just how it is whenever you actually do the dread trial. You never quite know what's going to happen. Do you have any weapons on you? Anything in your pockets at all? Nolan asked. No, nothing, I said. Good. Now once I leave this room, I want you to count backward from 100. Once you hit 0, you can take your blindfold off and the test will begin. Make sure you count slowly. Put a pause between each number. Understand? Yes, I understand. Okay, Nolan said, as he walked away from me. Once you hear this door close, start counting. Oh, and Allister? Yes? Good luck, Nolan said, slamming the door. 100, 99, 98, 97. I counted out loud. As I counted backward, I wondered how long it was going to take for Nolan to solve the puzzle I had made. As one of my final tests, I had to make a puzzle for Nolan to solve. If I could complete this final test before Nolan could finish my puzzle, Nolan said he would give me something special and one of a kind. I also couldn't help but wonder why Nolan had asked if I had any weapons. I never carried weapons. Would I need a weapon during this? No, there's no way. Why would I need a weapon? Nolan would never put me in any real danger, would he? Right? Then again, he did say that the dread trials could be literally anything and everything. Once your dread trial is assigned, they can come to your room in the middle of the night, drag you out, and force you to take the trial right then and there. No warning, no preparation time, nothing. Even before this particular test, Nolan had been preparing me for the dread trial with other tests. In one previous test, I had to solve a puzzle while sitting alone in a pitch-black room. The only way out was with a key that had been retrieved from said puzzle. Even though the puzzles weren't terribly difficult, it was still unnerving for me to be left in the dark like that. To make things worse, Nolan had me repeat this test on several occasions, each time with a different puzzle and at a shorter time limit. Thankfully, I was able to escape the room before time expired every time. I was never quite sure what would have happened if I hadn't. If this test was going to be anything like an actual dread trial, then it would be the first time I had ever experienced one. Obviously, I had never even had the opportunity to participate in a dread trial, but my brother and I had never even seen a dread trial. Our father had never let us watch any in the past. Sure, he let us watch the mental and physical trials every time they were on. He actually encouraged it. My late father, Wesley Bigsby, was a councilman and had been a big proponent of knowing your enemy. He had constantly preached to Kane and me that the only way to enact change was from inside. So even though our father had never supported the trials, he had told us that we needed to familiarize ourselves with them. That way, we had a better chance of passing the trials, which would enable us to help enact more change. Our father believed in this so much that he had spent most of his career trying to abolish the trials and the use of the gifts within the city. Since he had had a chance to be on the council, after all of this, I was determined to continue my father's legacy in this regard. Especially if it would piss off Cecil, the head councilman, and the rest of the aristocrat councilmen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I said, removing my blindfold. The room was dark, musty smelling, and everything was covered in cobwebs. The furniture and the floorboards were riddled with holes, and everything was the color of ash. There was a vaulted ceiling, so I assumed I must be in an attic. There was a window, but it was covered with boards and other materials, so barely any light was let in. To top it all off, it was somehow dusty and wet all at the same time. Water was falling from a few places around me, making constant drip, drip, drip sound. After a moment of letting my eyes adjust, I saw a puzzle box on the floor in front of me. There was a note beside the box that read, "Solve me." It was very similar to the puzzles that I had been solving and making with Nolan. I muttered to myself that if this was all the test would be, that I'd be out of here in no time. As I went about solving the puzzle, I heard a few creaks and thuds outside the door. I thought that it was probably just the old house settling. No big deal. I went on to finish the puzzle in only a few minutes. Inside to my dismay, instead of a key, I found another note. "The curious mind follows the path less traveled," I read aloud. What am I even supposed to? The curious mind follows the path less traveled. What is this? I reread the note at least 10 times and still had no idea what it meant or what I was supposed to do with it. While looking around the room and trying to figure out what to do next, I realized that I was surrounded by books. The floor, the tables, and the walls were completely covered in stacks of books. I was basically in a mini library. There had to be hundreds, if not thousands, of books around me. Before looking at the books more closely, I went to make sure that the door was actually locked. Sure enough, it wouldn't open. I sighed, took a deep breath, and got to work looking through the books for a way out. There are just too many. And they all look exactly the same. How am I even supposed to know which one has the key? I muttered to myself as I looked through the book stacks. The books were old and dusty. The only thing that differentiated them were slight variations in height and thickness. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. This can't be right, I said. Nothing stood out to me as I looked around the room again, so I decided to just continue what I'd been doing, which was looking through the books for a key. After a few minutes of searching, I heard movement outside the door. Scratching on the door soon followed. I thought that it was probably just a rat or something and ignored it. As I continued looking through the books, something banged on the door. "Hello? Who is it?" I said. "It's gotta be a rat. God, I hope it's just a rat." The banging continued, gradually getting louder and faster. Louder, faster, louder, faster, until finally it was so forceful that I started to see the door move. "Hello? Is someone there?" I said, my voice shaking. "Nolan, is that you? I finished the first puzzle and now I'm trying to figure out which book has the key." The banging continued and the scratching intensified, all while I could hear something not exactly human growling and grunting on the other side of the door. I cursed as I rushed away from the door. That was no ordinary rat. At this point, I started frantically grabbing books off the shelf and throwing them across the room. I figured I would probably hear a key hit the floor once it fell out of a book, so I just kept hurling books at as the banging continued. I kept muttering to myself, asking where it was and that this shouldn't be that hard. In the middle of tossing a book, I froze when I noticed something out of the ordinary. In a corner of the room, on the top shelf, I saw a bright red book that very distinctly stood out from the rest. How could I have missed it? I didn't have time to think about that. I had other things to worry about, such as the shelves being too narrow and weak for me to climb on because of the added weight and size of my gift. Again, check out my last video if you want to know more. I looked around the room hoping to find a ladder or something sturdy enough for me to climb on. In the opposite corner of the red book, I spotted a ladder that was just long enough to reach. As quickly as I could, I grabbed the ladder, placed it below the red book, and climbed up it. As the banging continued, I raced towards the red book, hoping against hope that it contained the key. When I reached for the red book to take it off the shelf, it couldn't be removed. Instead, it pulled down like a lever. After releasing it, I heard a sliding metallic sound below me. I looked down and saw a small opening underneath the bookshelf in front of me. The savage rumblings outside the door intensified as the growling, scratching, and the banging all combined together into one singular sound. My heart beat faster than I ever thought possible as I headed for the opening. Now that there seemed to be a way out, I clunkily climbed down the ladder and did my best to stuff my oversized shoulders through the small, tunnel-like opening below the bookcase. It was such a tight fit that I had to crawl on all fours to get inside. Once inside, heavy metal bars slammed down behind me, imprisoning me. I was only a few feet into the crawl space when I heard a loud crashing sound coming from where I had just been. When I turned to see what the noise was, the room had gone dark, forcing my eyes to adjust. Even before I could truly see in this newly found darkness, I was still able to make out the silhouette of a large, hunched figure on the other side of the room. I watched as the figure jerked its head awkwardly as it looked around the room. What the hell is this thing, I thought, trying my best to control my breathing. And what is it doing? Is it sniffing? What's happening? Why did it get so dark? The debris from the door must have hit the lights. The thing abruptly stopped and looked right at me. I inadvertently swore in my breath. Maybe if I didn't move, the creature wouldn't notice me. No luck. The creature slowly started towards me, taking small steps at first, until, without warning, it leapt right in front of the tiny crawl space. The room was dark, but its glowing yellow eyes were as clear as day to me. Even though the creature was still several feet away, the potent stench of something dead permeated off of it, filling my nostrils. After a brief standoff of looking into the creature's intense, radiating orbs, it lunged at me, forcing its snapping jaws through the protective bars. Luckily, it missed, but in that moment, I had been sprayed by the warm froth coming out of its long snout. I could also sense intense anger directed towards me from the creature. The creature grabbed the bars with its incredibly sharp-looking claws and violently pulled on them with all of its might. I wasn't sure if the creature could actually pull the bars apart, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I decided to take my chances by starting my journey into the small, dimly lit metallic tunnel. I immediately had to make a choice when I came to a fork in my path, right or left. Without deliberating too much, I took a right. I didn't have the time and I needed to put as much distance between myself and the creature as quickly as possible. As I crawled, I could still hear the creature behind me. Even though it was now almost pitch black and I could barely see my own hands underneath me, the noises continually motivated me to quickly choose a way every time the path came to a fork. As I continued to crawl, cobwebs kept getting in my face, which really didn't bother me at first. That is, until spiders gradually started to appear in the webs. After somewhat getting used to the spiders and their webs, I started to hear another noise that gradually grew in frequency. This time the noise came from underneath my hands and knees as I crawled. It was a crunching sound that could only be coming from bugs and other critters that lived in the pseudo-underground environment I now crawled through. At first I tried to ignore it as I had ignored the spiders and cobwebs, but there was no ignoring this. To make matters worse, every time I heard a crunch, I couldn't help but think what kind of noise I would make if the creature were ever to get a hold of me. I kept choosing different paths as fast as I could, sometimes right, sometimes left, sometimes straight, and sometimes there was a choice to go up or down. I would quickly make my choice, knowing full well that even if the creature wasn't behind me, it was probably waiting for me at the end of this makeshift maze. Eventually, my path turned from the metal of what was probably a ventilation shaft to dirt and then to mud. The dirt was several inches high, which meant that I, crawling on all fours, had to be that much closer to the ground since my torso was too bulky for me to crawl normally. While the ground was dirt, I felt and heard crunching as well as other things below me. The crunch of a cockroach was one thing, but each time I felt a worm or slug flatten underneath my weight, I would very nearly gag. I'd never been the squeamish type, but this was too much even for me. The webs of the spiders never relented either. The mud was the worst part. Like the dirt, it was several inches high. On my hands and knees, the mud would go well past my wrists. I kept getting stuck in the mud too, slowing my progress and eating away at the precious minutes I had to escape from the creature. I also tried not to dwell on the fact that I was constantly feeling what could only be described as dead animals underneath the mud. Some felt small, others felt quite large in comparison. Rats? Mice? Something else? I wasn't really too keen on figuring out what they were. Throughout all of this, I continued to quickly take lefts, rights, going straight, up, and down. From time to time, I'd hit a dead end forcing me to backtrack, which consequently caused me to have to touch the same carcasses again and again. In some areas, I would have 3 or more paths to choose from. In those instances, I'd often have to backtrack 2 or more times before finding the correct way. Doing this made me have to backtrack tens of feet at a time, which was not an easy task when I had to continually feel death beneath the muck. Slowly but surely, the mud turned back into dirt, and the dirt eventually revealed the metallic floor once again. The bugs underneath me lessened, and the spider webs disappeared. I finally felt like I was on the right path. I wasn't sure how long this whole endeavor had taken me, but I assumed it had been at least a couple of hours since I had last seen the creature. I hadn't heard it growl or anything in a while, and wasn't entirely sure if that was a good or a bad thing. I tried not to think about it though, and kept pushing forward as best as I could. Continuing my trek through the passage, I finally happened upon something promising. A glowing arrow pointing up. Without getting too excited about a potential exit, I tried pressing the arrow to see if anything happened. The arrow couldn't be pushed down, so I did the next logical thing and prepared to push up on the ceiling. Hesitating momentarily, I listened. Nothing. Silence. Silence was all I heard. I took a deep breath and prepared to ascend into whatever fresh hell awaited me. As I pushed the ceiling upward, I entered a room very similar to the one I was originally in. Not as many books were in this room, but they were still relatively the same, except that the light still worked in this one. While my eyes adjusted to the brightness, I slowly crawled out of the tunnels and made sure I was alone. Another puzzle lay in the middle of the room with a note that read, "Almost there," beside it. I picked up the puzzle and solved it quickly. I'd gotten very used to these types of puzzles by now. As it opened, I heard a jarring noise coming from outside the room. Trying not to panic, I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. I looked inside the open puzzle and, thankfully, there was a key in it. After hearing something just outside the door, I knew the creature was near and I didn't have much time. I unlocked the door and slowly opened it to reveal an empty hallway with a staircase at the end. I carefully walked through the door, quickening my pace as I walked. Suddenly, there was a loud crash behind me. I looked back and what I saw chilled me to the bone. The horrific creature was slowly getting up after I'd crashed through a hallway door. I cursed. As I ran down the staircase, I heard the creature barreling down on me with so much intensity that the house rattled around me, but I didn't dare turn around. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I saw a door leading to the outside. Breathing a sigh of relief, I went to open the door. It was locked. I yelled in frustration as I rapidly tried to turn the knob. I then reached in my pocket for the key from before. I hoped that it might work on this door too. I swore again when I realized that there wasn't a lock for the key to go into. There had to be another way out. As I ran away from the door, I heard the creature growl behind me in the distance. There were no other doors for me to even try to open at this point. "What kind of place is this?" I said. The creature again appeared right behind me, so I picked up my speed, not knowing or caring where I was going. I just wanted to get away from this thing's massive claws and jaws. I then came to a window in a dead-end hallway. Maybe I have enough time to get back. If I go now, then I could probably make it, I thought. As I turned around, the creature was standing right in front of me. For a moment, we both looked at each other. The creature then let out a giant guttural roar. Without thinking, I turned around and jumped through the window behind me, not knowing where I might land. Damn! I was on the 3rd floor, I thought, laying there looking up at the shattered window. Probably shouldn't have done that, but I had done that, and thankfully, aside from a few scrapes and bruises, I was physically okay. Mentally, I was a little banged up, but it wasn't any worse than what I had already been through recently. Oh sure, I may have still been covered in mud and other substances, but overall, I was fine. After jumping out of the window, I had somehow landed on a pile of old discarded mattresses that were lying in the middle of the alley. Before looking away from the window, I saw the outline of the creature sink back into the darkness. I closed my eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. "You could have used the door, you know," Nolan said as he walked up to me. "What the hell was that thing?" I said as I stood up. "Oh, that was Carl," Nolan said. "You met him before. He was one of the actors I hired when you were first going around the neighborhood." "It all just seems so real," I said, staring up at the broken window. "Hey, Nolan! Hey! Sorry I'm late. Are we still doing this thing?" said an out-of-breath man who had just ran up to us. "Carl? What are you talking about?" Nolan said. "We're done. You were just here. We just saw you in the window there. Didn't we?" Carl was wearing a costume made of fur and carrying a mask that had a long snout that was full of fangs. "What? Up there?" said Carl. "No, I just got here. I had to take my daughter to the doctor. Didn't you get my message?" Let's go back to my place so we can sort this all out." Nolan looked up at the window as he ushered us back to his house. Where man, my head hurts. What is happening? I slowly stood up from lying on the cold, hard ground. I had no idea where I was or what was happening. The last thing I remembered was going to bed after having dinner with my friends. We had all been working on our advantage puzzles, and for a quick break, we all met to have dinner. If we were able to complete the puzzle, then we could have an advantage during any of our trials. We can only use the advantage one time and only during one trial, so we all hoped and prayed that we would finish it before our dread trial. I looked around, but darkness was all I saw.
"Hello, King Bigsby,"
said a deep, gravelly voice in the darkness. What's going on? Where am I?
"Give me just a moment and I will enlighten you."
Light abruptly filled the room and, in the process, momentarily blinded me. As my eyes adjusted to the newfound light, I could vaguely make out a couple of tables in front of me. Or were they beds? I don't understand, I said.
"Oh, Mr. Bigsby, have you already forgotten about your dread trial?"
I swore. I should have known.
"Now tell me, Mr. Bigsby, what do you know about your final trial?"
Only the name.
"Ah, and what is the name?"
The key to victory.
"Good. Knowing the name of something can be a very powerful thing."
Right. So what are we doing? Is this part of the trial, or...
"Patience, young Bigsby, patience. You're too hasty, much like your brother. Your brother has always been too hasty. Don't be like your brother. You must forge your own path through this world and not walk in the shadows of others. For once you forge your own path, you will have a much grander effect on those around you. The sacrifices that you make here will focus you and allow you to shed your mortal coil. In turn, you will ascend to heights you never thought possible."
I had no idea what this gravelly-voiced psychopath was talking about. A part of me hoped that all I had to do was listen to this whack job spout his nonsense to complete the trial, but I knew better than that. Whatever the voice had planned, it was not going to be fun.
"Now, Cain, are you ready to be baptized in the blood of those who have failed before you?"
What is that? No, I'm not even...
"Once your baptism is complete, you will be reborn and have the ability to save those who are truly in need."
I don't... What?
"Cain, the time has come! If you will now please turn your attention to the front of the room. You may have noticed two separate tables where two young men are lying as still as can be. In order to complete the trial, you must save one of them by killing the other. If you fail, they both die, as do your chances of completing your final trial. Save one or save none. That is your task. Good luck."
What is all of this? Hello? Are you still there? What am I supposed to do? As if on cue, a timer above the two bodies started counting down from 30 minutes. The bodies were both males. Each had a blanket covering them. Both were blindfolded, and neither had a gift that I could see. On the wall, "Save me" was written above one, and "Kill me" was written above the other. The body below "Save me" had dark skin and dark hair, and the body below "Kill me" had fair skin, dark hair, and was quite a bit taller. I couldn't tell much more about them since their faces were covered. What concerned me the most, though, were the guillotines that hung above each of them. I immediately started trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. I knew from my last trial that I couldn't wait around, especially now that I only had myself to rely on. I started by just closing my eyes and taking a deep breath, like my brother Allister always did. I wondered what the man meant by, "Don't be like your brother." Was it actual advice, or was the gravelly voice trying to distract me? I did my best to shake off that line of thought. I didn't have time to worry about it. I looked around and took in everything. I needed to focus. The room wasn't very big, roughly 20 feet by 20 feet, and the only things in it were the two tables, the two people, the guillotines above them, the timer, an intercom, a tool tray in between the beds, a lock stop button, and keyholes. There were 5 keyholes in between the timer and the locked stop button. There was also a drawing of a key above the timer that said, "Find me." I assumed that I had to find all 5 keys, unlock the stop button, and then press it in order to complete the trial. My next step was to figure out where to start looking for the keys. I looked at the bodies on the table more closely and noticed that a key, covered by a cloth, was fastened to the blindfold of the body below "Kill me." I grabbed it and put it into the first keyhole. Before I could wonder what to do next, the same body started coughing and wheezing. "Oh no," I said. "He's awake." He was desperately gasping for air. His hands were strapped to the table, so he couldn't even grasp at his throat. I realized that he must be choking on something. I then frantically searched the room for something to help. Without thinking, I grabbed a long pair of plier-like tools from the tray table and thrust them into his throat. "I hope this works," I said. "Come on, I think I almost..." Got it. I pulled out the object, which was, to my surprise, the second key. Oh, didn't see that coming, I said, as I put the key into the second keyhole. I can't see nothing, the body said, coughing. Is someone there? What's going on? I didn't think you'd still be conscious, let alone that you would be this awake. Wow, what's going on? I can't move, the body said, still coughing and struggling. What's your name? What? What is your name? Rafe, he said with a cough. My name is Rafe Williams. I hate to tell you this, Rafe, but I'm in the middle of my dread trial, and you're a part of it. Oh, no. I should have known that this was how they were gonna do it. What do you mean? I failed on my trial, so now they're gonna execute me. I looked up at the kill me sign written on the wall behind Rafe and decided not to mention it. Don't worry, I said, trying to sound confident. We'll get through this. We? There's no we. My time is over. I'm gonna die no matter what at this point, and it looks like you'll probably be the one to do it. No, I won't. We'll figure out a way to get you out of this. Is it dark in here, or am I blind now? I can't see. Oh, your eyes are covered, I said as I removed Rafe's blindfold. There, you should be able to... I looked down at Rafe's face and saw that his left eye was freshly stitched shut, and there was a key drawn on his eyelid. His other eye was darkly colored. He had a small nose, thin lips, fair short hair, a bruise around his neck, and his nose was scabbed over, probably from where his gift had been. Thanks, I can see now. Is something wrong with my eye? I can't open it, he said, with a tinge of panic in his voice. Yeah, it looks like it was stitched shut for some reason, I said, realizing he looked familiar. I feel like I recognize you from somewhere. You probably saw me fail my trials. Maybe. What was the last one? Because I swear I just saw you. I had to fight some guy in the dark. The last thing I remember before waking up here is waking up after getting choked out and this attendant tells me I failed all my trials. Oh God. You're the guy that Hunter beat, I said, swearing again. Hunter? I never got no name. I take it that your friend's the reason I'm here. Well, I mean, I'm the reason I'm here. I failed all three. Still would have been nice if you would have at least given me a chance. I think I could have taken him in a fair fight if we would have just... Wait, do you smell that? Smell what? Everything. I can smell again. I was confused at first, but then realized that Rafe's gift must have taken away his sense of smell. I was more confused about why Rafe didn't have his gift now. Was there a reason that they took it off? I thought that maybe it was to make it easier for me to find the keys, not so much as a favor to Rafe. I looked up at the clock and grimaced. I didn't have time to think about Rafe's gift, or lack thereof, any longer. I only had about 15 minutes left to complete my trial. I took a deep breath and apologized to Rafe as I held up a scalpel. Grasping what was about to happen, Rafe started thrashing about as he tried to get off the table. He had been smiling while just sniffing with his nose for the first time in years, but now he looked utterly terrified. His body was strapped down, including his head, so he wasn't able to move much. Despite that, I steadied his head with my left hand and held the scalpel in my right. Once again apologizing, I reluctantly told him that he had to hold still. Rafe screamed out, begging me not to do what I was about to do. Tightening my grip on the scalpel, I pushed down on his head to keep it from moving. I then inserted the tip of the blade into the bottom of his eye socket and, slicing upward, opened the fresh stitches. Rafe continued to scream as I, feeling almost possessed, dropped the scalpel and reached my hand into the eye socket. To my relief, his eye was not there. As quickly as I had sliced the eye's stitch open, my hand was in and out of the eye socket with my prize. I held up the key in my hand for a moment and noticed it had a message written on it. Look lower, I read to myself in an almost trance-like state. What are you doing? Rafe said with an agonizing scream. I could barely hear him. I knew that I should be horrified by my own actions, but I almost felt like I wasn't even there. It was as if someone else was inhabiting my body and I was looking on from the outside. Rafe's screams continued to echo throughout the dark and musty chamber. Undeterred by his wails, I moved the blanket that was covering Rafe down past his stomach. His chest was bare, so as soon as I moved the blanket, I saw that a key was drawn on his stomach. I calmly walked over and put the third key into its hole and, just as calmly, walked back to Rafe. I'm sorry, but I have to do this. Do what? Do what? Whatever it is, just kill me first. Slice my throat or something. Just kill me! I couldn't hear him. In my mind, it was only me, the scalpel in my hand, and the key. In that moment, to me, there was an obstacle standing in between me and what I desired, and I was going to remove that obstacle no matter what it took. In a robotic voice, I told Rafe to lie still and that it would all soon be over. I placed my left hand on his stomach and raised the scalpel in my right hand, oblivious to the screams and cries. I placed the blade at the bottom of his sternum and sliced until I reached below his belly button. With a blank look on my face, I calmly placed the scalpel on the tray with the other tools. I then grabbed each side of the cut and pried apart the skin, revealing the intestines. I reached inside of Rafe with my bare hands and started searching for the key. To make it easier, I started to pull out large portions of intestines and organs. I wasn't sure how long I'd been doing this, but for some reason, I looked up at the clock. I had less than 5 minutes remaining. I then realized Rafe wasn't screaming, moving, or making any kind of noise. I was relieved at first because I thought Rafe had just passed out from the pain. However, the reality of it all soon sank in. Oh no, what have I done? I killed him. My hand, still inside of Rafe, touched something metallic. I wrapped my fingers around it and brought it out. I studied my blood-covered prize for a moment, but it didn't give me any indication of what I was supposed to do next. Without knowing what my next move would be, I walked over to the fourth keyhole and put the key into it. Robotically, I looked around the room for what to do next, for where to find the final key. I started by removing the blanket and blindfold off the other body, who I assumed was still alive, but I found nothing. No clue. I tried lifting both bodies to see if there was anything underneath. Again, nothing. I looked under the tables and found nothing. I even looked in the keyhole just in case, but again, nothing. Lost and with absolutely no hope, I dropped to my knees and started sobbing. With tears streaming down my face, I silently sat there, clueless about what to do next. My arms were dangling at my side, so I moved them to sit on my thighs because it was a much more comfortable position for me. Once my forearms landed on my thighs, I felt something in my pocket. Curious as to what it was, I reached in. My eyes widened as I pulled out the most amazing thing I had ever seen in my life. My advantage puzzle, I said. Right before going to sleep the night before, I had been working on the puzzle and was growing increasingly frustrated with it. Numerous times I told myself that I needed to go to sleep, but I would always make some small step forward in completing it, so I kept going. At one point, I was working on the puzzle and I started nodding off. I forced myself to keep working on the puzzle into the night. I wasn't sure how late it was, but deep into the night I heard a final click come from the advantage puzzle. It lit up in my hand, signifying that it was complete and ready to go. Right before going to sleep, I placed the completed puzzle into my pocket and said to myself, just in case. With just 90 seconds remaining, I, silently thanking my sleep-deprived self, held out the completed puzzle and said, show me where the final key is. Bright light then shone from the puzzle onto the final key's location. No, this can't be. How can it? I looked at the clock and then back to the final spot of the key. I got off my knees and grabbed the scalpel with my left hand. I took off my blood-covered shirt and plunged the scalpel into where the key was located. A scar on my right shoulder. Prior to my second trial, I discovered that I was having pain there, but before I could figure out what it was, my trial began. I had forgotten about the scar until the light revealed its secret. After jabbing the scalpel into my scar, I made an incision long enough for my hand to fit it. Through pain-ridden screams and tears, I dropped the scalpel and finally reached my hand inside my own shoulder. I was mercifully able to quickly grasp the key and pull it out. I rushed over to the final keyhole and placed the key inside. I turned each key and, with 4 seconds remaining, was finally able to press the stop button. Seeing that the timer had stopped, I fell to the ground and started to fall into unconsciousness. Before my eyes closed, I heard a shink from the guillotine, followed by a thud. Rafe's one-eyed head then rolled into my sight, meeting my fading gaze.